Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta, no matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. The summer series continues. It's Real versus Rogue, and we have a very special guest in the house. Let's rock and roll, squaddies.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Definitely gone rogue with these summer hours. Our second show, we're back. And if I'm going to go rogue, I couldn't think of a better person to go rogue with. And by the way, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please subscribe and leave a review, especially when you have one of the best in the business in the house, Mr. Elliot from Arsenal Vision podcast. Welcome back to Squad Central.
Well, it's always lovely to see you. I enjoy being able to chat to you from around the world through the magic of this internet thing that we have. Isn't this incredible? You're thousands and thousands of miles away, and I'm stuck here in the middle of this country with the heat and the mosquitoes, and you're somewhere glamorous. But I'm glad to share this time with you.
Well, there's still heat and mosquitoes where I am, by the way.
Is there?
But yeah, there is. That's island. The humidity is crazy, which is probably why I look like I'm sweating like swine. But it's good to be in the motherland and the birthplace of Aphrodite. And I am looking forward to coming back stateside as well. Are you having a good summer? Are you going anywhere? Are you having a vacation? Anything?
I've committed to doing a transfer daily for our patrons, so that should tell you.
Oh my God!
No, not really. I am going to New York. I'm going to take the little girls to New York City. My youngest hasn't been, and obviously that's where I'm from originally, so excited for them to see that. And then down to Pennsylvania to see my sister and her husband with my mom and dad. So a bit of a getaway, but more of a family thing. And what's going to be really fun is explaining why I have to leave the Build-A-Bear workshop to go record the Transfer Daily.
Is this the first time you've done a Transfer Daily?
Yeah, first and last.
Once you commit, it's, I've been enjoying my time here with my family, switching off from transfers and everything. And I felt like this week I needed to get back because there was a fair bit going on. But I have to say, it has been phenomenal. And if there's one thing, I commend you and I commend anyone who does a Transfer Daily show, because it is a bit of a shit show. And it's my first question to you, actually, because a lot of Arsenal fans are starting to panic. I wondered if you were calming the chaos or in the panic mode, because it's kind of like that narrative where we hear words like, I actually wrote some down: exploratory, interested, impressed, desirable, and no official signings just yet. And Andrea Berta's on the clock already for a lot of Arsenal fans. Where do you stand, Elliot?
I'm respectfully assessing our window is what I'm doing. I first of all, just so we're clear, like on the Transfer Daily, what I do is I go on for 15 or 20 minutes and just lampoon what is the absurdity of the transfer window mostly. When there's actual news to analyze, we'll get someone real on, like Clive or Tim or Paul or Phil or Scott or someone like that. But otherwise, it's me kind of just lampooning and satirizing what is a pretty silly time. And I think we all need that a bit, because on social media, it can get quite hairy. People get quite intense about this stuff. And I understand it is the future of our club and the competitiveness of our club. But there is a humorous side to this to be had. I saw a report the other day that a club are considering opening talks with a player. How do you know someone's I'm considering opening talks with this player? So you have to laugh at the ridiculousness. You have to try to analyze the serious stuff, but try to be able to keep the two separated.
I mean, this guy's the man, though, isn't he, Elliot? He comes with such great pedigree. We all know his work and what he was able to do at Atleti, and working with someone like Diego Simeone, who's not the easiest of characters, and Mikel too is not the easiest of characters. He's like a teddy bear with a shotgun, but it's kind of silly to be criticizing him at this point, is it not? I don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, right, is that ultimately we don't know how much of his imprint is going to be made on this particular transfer window. It's sort of like Jason Ato getting criticized for what we did in January. It's like asking the guy who gets the coffee and does the Xerox machine at the office why he didn't help the stock price go up or something. Adu took off just before January. The guy who's been a backup is suddenly the guy in charge, and then things don't get done, and then suddenly it's his fault when we all know that there's a pretty rigid hierarchy at Arsenal. I mean, Tim Lewis is there, Richard Garlick is there, Josh Kroenke is involved, obviously. Mikel Arteta certainly has some decision-making authority, and I think everybody comes together to make these decisions collectively. No one individual does it. I think if we're unable to get deals done that we know the club want to complete, that would certainly raise questions, I think, about the job being done by the director of football, because ultimately where I think Berta's role is pretty clear is that he has to complete the deals that we want to get done. As of right now, I think there's a lot of posturing and positioning to get the best deal available, but I'm pretty sure Mikel Arteta will have also said, I want a full preseason with these players. I don't want it like last summer where deals stretch out and we're trying to integrate them late in the summer. So roughly second week of July, by that point, if we don't see deals moving towards completion, especially if things like Zubimendi haven't been completed, then I think it's fair to maybe point the finger at Berta and just say, is there a challenge there in terms of completing a process? But it's so hard to analyze these directors of football in current football structure because it is, I think, a collaborative effort. And I think there's a very robust hierarchy in place. And it's hard to know who has the final say on any of this, really.
It's interesting you mentioned that regarding the final say, because I know, you've spent a lot of time around, people at the club. And by the way, congrats again for the amazing work that you've done for the Arsenal Foundation.
Oh, thank you.
Another year where you guys just, blew it out of the park. And, when you talk to people around the club, they do say that it is a decision by committee. Definitely when Adu was there, it was by a committee of 4. I assume that stays even with Berta coming in, even though he's a pretty strong character. There's been this talk of, Sesko feels like a Mikel guy and Gyökeres feels like a Berta guy. We don't know that for sure. How do you see that? Do you still see that Arsenal's decision making will be done by committee, even though maybe some members of that committee haven't made the best decisions in the last 2 windows, i.e. not particularly active?
That's obviously impossible for me to say with confidence. I'll simply try to apply some logical reasoning to it, which is I think Berta and Arteta will get together with their team of scouts and have a pool of players that they discuss. Mikel will say, here are the ones that I favor. Berta might say, here are the ones that I favor. They'll make the argument. There'll be some kind of meeting of the minds, right? Whether this is done over email or over Zoom, it doesn't have to be done in person, but some kind of back and forth, the document that they're using to identify, here's number 1 target at this position. Here's number 2. Here's the characteristics we're looking for from a footballing standpoint. Here are the economic realities of the deal. And ultimately, when they determine the deals they want to make, then they're going to have to sell it up the chain of command to Tim Lewis, to Richard Garlick, to Josh Kroenke on the economics of it, why they're making that move and what they think the right price point is and the right wages are for that player. Then they have to execute, right? And I'm sure that what Berta is doing, you're seeing a lot of reporting that he's simultaneously looking at multiple targets, for example, Sesko and Gyökeres, understanding that having those 2 discussions open at the same time, 1, reduces the likelihood that you get frozen out altogether and wind up with no one. 2, that you get target lock and the club knows you have target lock and they have all the leverage in the negotiation. It keeps them honest in the negotiation and helps you discover what the right price is and what the right value is for these players. It probably also helps the player's agent feel more urgency to find a meeting of the minds on price because they understand that they could lose the deal to another player and then their client, their player might say, why is Gyökeres off to Arsenal, Mr. Agent? You told me, Benjamin Sesko, I was going to be going to Arsenal. You told me that's where I would land. So I think it's a smart strategy. I think it starts with the manager, the sporting director, and the scouts agreeing on targets and agreeing on the prioritization. And then it's up to Burden to, I think, work up the chain of command at Arsenal, manage up to understand what the budget is, what resources are available, and what he has to work with. Okay, well, today on this episode of Highbury Squad, you're the boss. You're the director of football. You're making the decisions. And we're effed. Fully, completely.
Well, I was kind of like noodling on this idea of we all kind of dream big. And one of the things I just feel that, you know, once we signed Declan Rice, £100 million player, I felt like Arsenal signing another £100 million player wasn't a stretch. You know, we've been linked with so many different players. I know one of your favorites is Isaac, and I dream of signing Rodrygo. But I don't feel like it should be a stretch anymore for us, because you've got certain players that elevate the team, like a Trossard in a January elevates the team. But what we haven't had enough of is those players that win you titles, to match Saliba and Declan Rice and Saka. So the floor is yours. I don't know. Last night I did this with Dan Potts and I knew who he had picked. So I had some picks ready. But with you, I kind of like the element of surprise. You know, It's a little bit like an American daytime soap opera, Elliot. So let's hear your kind of rogue versus, you know, real.
Okay, so I think the first thing we have to do is set some boundaries on what I'm even allowed to do, right? Can I go get Isaac and Rodrygo? No, I don't think anybody thinks we can do that. Having said that, I just watched Liverpool get Florian Wirtz, and now they're linked with Isaac themselves, right? Or Hugo Ekitike, who's also going to be €100 million. I think there is a perception, Sophie, and I just want to address this, that we are miles from where we need to be. That there's somehow a full rebuild of sorts that needs to be done, and that the entire forward line needs to be ripped up and rebuilt. I agree we are short in attack. I also think that the injuries this season distorted what our attack really can be, and distorted the fact that we were a 91-goal team a season before last. Now, again, that doesn't mean that I'm satisfied with our attack, but I think the perception that only 2-star forwards will take us to the promised land, I think is a bit off target. So, for example, if you told me that we can only get one of, let's say, a Sesko or a Rodrygo, or a Gyökeres or Rodrygo, I'm probably going to go for Rodrygo. I think we can improve off the left substantially. I love Gabriel Martinelli, but I think Martinelli should be the kind of player who's fighting to be in lineups, not the guy who is just entitled to be in lineups with a 30-year-old Leo Trossard behind him. So I'd love to see Martinelli fighting for his minutes with Rodrygo there. That's a player that I think really improves us. And he could play through the middle, and he could play off the right if he had to. Rodrygo gives us versatility. He gives us, I think, real sophistication off the left. You know, he is a very technically gifted player who will create a lot of opportunities for players and demand that defenses don't just overemphasize defending Saka. Okay, then you say, well, if we can't go really big at striker, what would you do? I am not saying I want Ollie Watkins. That's not my point. But if Ollie Watkins is a market opportunity, if you could get Ollie Watkins for, let's say, £40 million, and you get Rodrygo as a result of that, I like that better than pushing the boat out for someone like, let's say, Sesko at €80 million and winding up with Leo and Martinelli again off the left, if that makes sense. Right? Now, my preference, look, what do I want to do? Sesko plus Rodrygo. That's what I think a really ambitious club that's looking toward the future and the present does. Rodrygo can come in, hit the ground running right now. Sesko gives you really exciting upside for the future and can probably contribute right away at some level. That, to me, if I'm in a position to make the decisions and spend what needs to be spent, and I can convince the Cronkies and Tim Lewis and Richard Garlick that this is our moment to show ambition and not be left behind by two active clubs in Liverpool and City. It's Sesko, it's Rodrygo, plus Zubimendi, plus the defender, plus the goalkeeper. But then I think there's that one more piece of the puzzle. And for me, it's the area we've really ignored since Mikel has been here. Ignored is the wrong way to put it. Stylistically, Mikel has shown us that Kai Havertz, that Declan Rice, that Mikel Merino are the kind of eights he wants to use on the left. Right? That off-the-ball, physical profile, win the duels, win the aerials, arrive in the box late, I get it. But what if we were just willing to go for a Xavi Simons? Or what if we were willing to go for an Eberechi Eze? Right? Someone who could play that left eight with a little bit more fantasy, a little bit more tight space, final ball quality, so that we don't have to just rely on Odegaard to do it, which he doesn't always feel like he's able to do. And we don't just rely on our wingers to do it. Someone with a little bit more devil in his game in the final third. You can still line up those giants at left 8 when you want to, but I think we're missing one more really creative, exciting final third playmaker in midfield. Our Gundogan, if you will, right, to go with Odegaard. And so if it's Xavi Simons, if it's Eze, if you have another name that you like in that role, I'm open to hearing it, but I think that could be a really important addition.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel that a lot of Arsenal fans think that just going out and getting the number 9 is going to deliver the title. And I just don't think that's the case at all. And I totally agree with you in that. I was saying to Potsy last night, for me, Martinelli is the kind of guy that I want to bring off the bench with 25 minutes to go so he can torture a defense that's already been run ragged. A little bit like how Trossard, I felt like, was becoming a super sub for us. I mean, he didn't like it, but it felt like that role really suited him. And Martinelli, it felt like last season, maybe through injury, but even the couple seasons prior, Elliot, that the team was kind of picking itself again. And I don't think that's been healthy for this squad.
Can I say one thing on that, Sophie?
Yeah.
I don't think it feels bad when a team picks itself if you love the team that's picking itself. I mean, we forget this, but like PSG's team picked itself the last 3-4 months of the season, right? I mean, that's a team you can close your eyes and you can name everybody who's going to start. I don't think there's any question. Bradley Barcola might think he's got a chance to come in instead of Doué, but by the end, not really. Even Liverpool's 11 was pretty well established through most of the season. I think people say, I don't like when the 11 picks itself. That usually is said by fans like us that just don't like what the 11 is, right? Because if we had Rodrygo, Sesko, Saka, Eze, Odegaard, Rice, and that was the 11. I don't think people would say, I hate that the 11 picks itself. I think people would be saying, wow, we're really, really good. And then, Kai could come in as a rotational option and Marino could come in, and that's very exciting. But I think an 11 picking itself is only a negative if it's not a good enough 11. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear you. Do you think, I believe that if we're at mid-August and it's the first game of the season, call me crazy, let's say we sign Sesko. I think Mikel still has faith and starts with Kai up front.
He probably should.
I think
he probably should. I mean, right now, Benjamin Sesko is a really exciting player with a lot of exciting physical tools who is not yet producing anything at the level of an established star who can come into the Premier League and hit the ground running right away. I'm going to invoke the name that's going to scare people, and I don't mean to suggest they're the same player. But Rasmus Højlund is a great example of someone that before he arrived at United, physically he looked really interesting, powerful, strong. He could run. We all remember the first game he played against us. He was scary and intimidating, right? But there was that little thing in his game before he arrived where his shot totals were kind of low. And people were like, oh, it'll be interesting to see how that translates into the Premier League. Well, fast forward, and now he's a player that gets less than 1 shot per 90 at United, and his inability to get shots means he's not an elite goal scorer, even though he has some elite physical tools. Now, again, I am not saying Sesko is Højlund. What I'm saying is, as of this moment, I think Benjamin Sesko is a physically extremely exciting player whose game is still developing, and Kai Havertz is a guy who has had 20 goals and assists at Arsenal in the Premier League. So for me, the 20 goal and assist guy in the Premier League is perfectly fine to start while we bring along the player that's making a league switch and still developing his game.
Does Gyökeres start ahead of Kai Havertz?
Gyökeres is probably the hardest player to parse of anybody that might move this summer. Because, first of all, if all you care about is the data and you don't care about the league, the guy has just destroyed the Portuguese league. Destroyed it. Right? I mean, over 5 shots per 90, over an XG and XA per 90s, tons of goals. I mean, even if you strip out the penalties, the goals are still a lot. But then you dig into it, a lot of the goals are coming against the bottom half of the Portuguese league, and that level has been compared with League One in England in terms of what the bottom of the Portuguese league looks like. I think he is a very, very good player. I cannot for the life of me figure out if I think the league strength has basically exaggerated his numbers, or if he is that good. And by the way, I know he did it to City, but there were penalties. There were, weird goals in that game. I would be inclined to be okay taking gamble on Gyökeres, but I wouldn't necessarily expect him to come to the Premier League and be able to completely reproduce what he's been. I mean, and that maybe that's just obvious, because if you thought he could reproduce what he's been, you spend 120 million on him tomorrow. It's a question of whether the physical qualities of the Premier League are going to make it hard for him to dominate the way he has in Portugal, basically.
Do you say that because also kind of, if you look at a case study, someone like Darwin Núñez, who was also exceptionally dominant in that league. Call me crazy. I still feel like there's a really good player in there with Núñez. I don't know why it hasn't really worked out majorly for him at Liverpool. But is that a concern?
Yeah, I mean, of course it's a concern. I mean, I think when you look at the strikers and goal scorers from Portugal that have come to the Premier League, it's been more misses than hits. Darwin Núñez, I think the issue, though, is, first of all, the 6 inches between his ears. Right? I think he's got a bit of a concentration problem, to put it nicely. And it's the finishing. Darwin Núñez has never struggled to get chances and create chances for his teammates. He is an end product machine. Until this season, he was taking shots. He was getting, creating key passes. He's too strong for anyone to handle physically. He's too fast for anybody to keep up with him. But I mean, you look at Adama Traore, and it's very similar, right? Adama Traore is one of the best dribblers in world football in terms of the number of times he beats someone. Then he beats them again, then he beats them again, then he puts the ball in a rosette every time. So Darwin Núñez didn't have a problem having his pace and his physicality translate to the Premier League. He just couldn't finish his dinner. And eventually, I think that just led to, psychologically, him kind of melting down and not getting on with Slot and losing his place. But yeah, there's not been a great track record of Portuguese attackers coming into the Premier League and lighting it up. And that's the reason for my hesitation. It's my only reason for hesitation. I will say I was in Lisbon for the Sporting game this season, the 5-1. And while he didn't score, I actually thought Gyökeres looked pretty good against our players.
I agree.
They marshaled him pretty well. But then when Kivior came on, he did the thing that all the really intelligent attackers do. He found the guy he thought he could beat, put himself on him, and ran him and got that shot off that just went off the outside of the post. And that little flash of a moment showed the intelligence, the movement, the pace, the shooting ability. It's all there. It's just a question of whether to translate to the Premier League.
So I really went rogue last week, and Demsek, a Squaddy OG here, is saying it for me again. And when you want to go rogue, do you go rogue? Do we go this kind of rogue, or do we stay away from this kind of rogue? Because I do believe that Grealish is a player that still has something. I think he's been written off too soon. Clearly, it's not worked out particularly. I mean, he's a treble winner. I think he's had glimpses of real wonderful moments for City. But I don't know, sometimes I think about him and I think, well, he's a good fit for Tottenham. But do you go this kind of rogue, like pick up a player like that?
I have some rogue ideas. He's not one of them. And here's what I'd say with Grealish. And before I say this, I want to preface it by saying I am someone who has bought an entire round of Jaeger bombs for all of the Tollington after a match. Okay. I worry about whether he has the lifestyle of a professional footballer who could play for Mikel Arteta, and see what's happened with Pep. And again, from the outside looking in, young guy has fun, has a few drinks, and we all jump to conclusions. But I do just wonder if he's a serious professional athlete. It's a worry. I guess that's what I would say. I know it's so dangerous to go into that kind of analysis, but it's been many years now since he's been effective. I do worry about his professionalism. So I just wouldn't roll the dice on a guy who you don't know if his lifestyle is going to support him being successful. Yeah. I don't think that's a talent issue. So that's where I fall with that.
Fair comment. I think it's a fair comment.
There are a couple interesting ones. You mentioned Darwin Núñez, by the way, and I would just say this, right? If Darwin Núñez got cheap enough, and he won't get cheap enough, unfortunately, because Saudi are interested, and as long as Saudi are interested, the price won't come down. And we've been very unfortunate. We're one of the few clubs that can't get any of that sweet Saudi cash. But throwing a chaos agent with his pace and his power on the left and just saying, go run fullbacks to death, pull defenders over, the space that could create for Saka, if you have someone like Darwin Núñez just battering down the left-hand side, bullying defenders, trundling over center backs, getting in the box and just being a maniac. I mean, he's like a box of fireworks. It just like creates enough chaos on the left to open up space for some of the other players, which I really think we need. And if there's anything that I would criticize Martinelli for, it's just that he's become more one-dimensional and more predictable in his dribbling, in his attacking. His dribble numbers are way down. His shot numbers are way down. And as a result, defenses aren't having to key on him as much, which is allowing them to be much more compact and focused on the right-hand side. So Darwin, if you wanted to go rogue, Darwin's a guy who, at the right price, I'd still gamble on the physical tools. Another go rogue that everybody would absolutely hate, but I think that's the point of going rogue, is Garnacho. Now,
okay, hold your thought, because Cameron's a Liverpool fan, and he said Darwin was better under Klopp. He's frustrating, but Diaz came from Porto. He's been good. I'm a fan of Diaz for sure. But yeah, it's interesting to see fans who support the team, who watch them week in, week out as well. But you've just gone really rogue, only because I'm not sure I can stand to look at his haircut week in, week out. But go on, I'm listening.
Pretty privilege is a thing in football, right? I mean, people loved Olivier Giroud, and there's a lot of pretty privilege happening there. But the thing with Garnacho is, I don't think people realize he's 20 years old. Just for a few more days, but he's 20, right? This is a 20-year-old player who's had 2 seasons over 2,000 minutes in the Premier League, where he's produced 7 goals, 6 goals, off, by the way, 8 XG, 7 XG. His underlying numbers are pretty good. His shot numbers are pretty good. I mean, he's taking over 3 shots per 90. My biggest issue with him actually is I worry if he's one of these players who has too much of an eye for his own shot and not enough of an eye for his teammates. But again, you're asking me to go rogue. This is not necessarily who I want. But anyone who at 19 and 20 years old has put up seasons of double-digit goals and assists in the Premier League is someone you should be thinking of, right? And I just think because he's been associated with the dysfunctional United, because his social media account is a bit of a dumpster fire, because he's, let's just call it, not the most comely Premier League player to ever exist, right? Not the most beautiful, he says, in his glass house. I just think there's a lot of people that would be down on that. But if we have to go rogue, going rogue for a 20-year-old who has done it in the Premier League a little bit, that's a gamble you can take. Another one that might qualify as rogue, although I don't think it's rogue because everybody would take him if they could, can you take Morgan Rogers and make him a wide player? Villa will have to sell someone, Soph. I think their wages to turnover is not good. I think he's the literal last player they'd want to sell. But I think you could convert Morgan Rogers to a really effective wide player. And if you could do that, depending on the price, that would be an expensive way to go rogue.
See, I did have a picture of Morgan Rogers. I did not have a picture of Garnacho.
For everyone's benefit? Again, he says in his glass house.
No, but I mean, I found it really strange, actually, when Amorim wouldn't play him, when clearly he's their biggest threat going forward. He's a bit of a kamikaze player. You never quite know what you're going to get. I wonder if he's a little bit, does he fall into the Grealish box? Not for the lifestyle, the drinking and all that jazz, but maybe just for, he seems to have an arrogant chip, and I'm not sure it's a confident arrogance, or there's something about him that's a little off for me. I'm not sure he feels like part of a culture.
So here's the difference.
Arsenal.
So I didn't give Grealish the benefit of the doubt, right? First of all, because lifestyle is a little different than attitude. But the other reason is Grealish is at a place that's for serious professionals, right? Manchester City and Pep Guardiola. Garnacho's in a place that just seems to make everybody look like they have a crap attitude, make everybody look like they're out for themselves. It's complete and total dysfunction across the board. Now, again, rolling the dice on a player actually having the right attitude is dangerous. But I'd be more inclined to believe you could reclaim a 20-year-old from Manchester United's dysfunction than believing you can reclaim a late 20s player who might have actual lifestyle and professionalism issues. So I think those things are slightly different. By the way, I mean, I know this sounds crazy. Jack Grealish turned 30 this season. 30.
That's crazy.
So, it's not like maybe it could still happen for him. It hasn't happened, and that's kind of that, as sad as that may be.
Yeah. He definitely fits in at Tottenham. I think that's a good. I think that's a good shout.
He can spend his early 30s at Tottenham for me. That's fine.
Now, I know this is a player that you love, and I wanted to just talk about him real quick. Obviously, he's not for sale. It's not happening. But you know what I really wish Arsenal had a little bit more of is, I know the Sol Campbell signing is yesteryear, Elliot. I know, Alexis Sanchez at the time was a real coup. Mesut Ozil was a real coup. I even think we talked a little bit about it last night. Like Aubameyang was a bit of a wow signing, I think. I mean, he was one of the best strikers in Europe, chose Arsenal. Why are we not that club that gets that type of player or convinces that type of player why he should leave Newcastle United and come? And you pay 120 million for Isaac. I know that doesn't leave you too much, and maybe now I'm playing, fantasy football in a way. But my point more is, why can't we do that?
So I'm going to push back a little bit, Soph, because you're saying something that I hear a lot. So I'm not being critical, but I want to make the point that I don't understand why we don't get credit for the Declan Rice purchase in that category. This is, in my view, a better player than Isaac. I think it is one of the biggest purchases that has been made inside the Premier League ever. It's not just one of the biggest purchases of all time. It's one of the biggest inside the Premier League purchases of all time. And we did it head to head with the richest, most dominant, successful club of the moment, with the best manager maybe in club football history trying to seduce him to come to their club. And we got him.
Okay, so can I jump in real quick? Maybe what I should have said was, why can't we do that again? What I've been saying on the show is, I mean, Saliba is worth, 100 million to Real Madrid or whatever. Saka is in that bracket. Declan Rice is in that bracket. In order to win a title, you've got Saliba, you've got Declan Rice, you've got Saka. Why can't we do that again? Why do we stop at a certain line?
Well, so just so we're clear, right? I don't think it's that we can't do it again. I think the reason we can't do it again is it's hard. I think that the most likely answer is no one will get Isaac because Newcastle won't want to sell him. I'll say this, Sophie, if Isaac moves, I think we will be one of the clubs very much likely to get him. If Isaac moves, I'll actually go out on a limb and say this. If Isaac moves this summer, it'll be to Arsenal and no one else. How about that? I'll say that.
That's pretty confident.
I don't think any club will get him unless it's us this summer. Next summer we'll have to see. But this is the other problem, Sophie, and this is where we get criticized. If you want an Alexander Isak, you also have to be prepared for the possibility you cannot get him, which means you have to be prepared to do things like get all the way deep into August with no striker being signed. You can't have it both ways. You can't say go buy the most expensive, complicated transfer to pull off maybe in all of football right now, but get it done early. You can't say go make the hardest transfer possible, devote your summer to this 120 million pound striker, but if you can't pull it off, then we're going to complain that you didn't get something done early. You know what I mean? Like, that's the hard part. If I told you, Sophie, in order to get Isaac, we have to go till August 20th trying, or we can just get Sesko July 1st. Which are you taking?
You know what? And I swear, I mean, this is what I truly, truly think is because I've seen the Sesko type signing before. The Greek gambler in me says, let's roll the dice and go and try and get Isaac. And if we fail, and the problem is the narrative I know is going to be, oh, it's just PR. They told us they tried. It's the usual crap from the club. And I don't agree with that because I think sometimes fans just don't realize how bloody hard it is to sign one player. And I would gamble because of him, because it's him.
Yeah, and by the way, like, that's a totally reasonable approach to take. I just think this is why this is all so hard, because you can make a really good concerted effort all summer long to get Isaac and fail because those deals are hard to do. By the way, another thing we should get credit for, it looks like we're going to get Zubimendi. I think we will. Liverpool wanted Zubimendi. That is a fact. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have David Ornstein tweets going back, I want to say a summer ago, talking about everything's in line for him to go to Liverpool. So I don't think that we struggle with any, what the kids call pull, right? I think our pull is fine. I think players want to be at Arsenal. I think we are willing to pay the wages we need to for them to be at Arsenal. I think we've shown with the contracts we're giving out, by the way, we can keep our players. It's not that long ago that Arsene Wenger was saying you can't lose Sam Nasri and Cesc Fabregas in the same summer and claim to be a big club, and then we lost Sam Nasri and Cesc Fabregas in the same club summer, right? So I do think we deserve credit for re-upping Gabby and re-upping Ethan and re-upping Miles and re-upping Saka, all the things that are going to be done. I bet we are able to re-up William Saliba as well, right? That we're able to keep players in this project, because what you don't want to do is buy an Isak but lose a Saka, or buy an Isak and lose a big Gabby at the back. So, I don't want to present it as though everything's been done right. I think last summer was a big miss. I think January was a big miss. But I think the idea that we can't get big deals done, that we can't attract big players, that we don't do what's needed when the right player is there is not correct. The hard thing, Sophie, is what do you do when the right player, the clearly right player, isn't there? And that's where you have to decide, do we just want to make fans happy or do we want to be disciplined? If the right player isn't there, do you buy the next guy and hope? Or do you not buy it all? Because it's easy to be critical of Arsenal's last summer. And I'll hold my hand up and say I'm critical of it too, Soph. Mm-hmm. But name for me the players Liverpool bought last summer. Name for me the players Manchester City bought last summer. The market wasn't there. The big clubs didn't move. And Liverpool stood pat. They bought Mamardashvili and sent him on loan. They bought Chiesa, who didn't play. And they won the league. Right? So I think there's a discipline to going big for the players when you know you want them, like we've done with Rice, like we're going to do with Zubimendi. But not just going for a player for the sake of saying you got a player.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the difference between us and Liverpool is their infrastructure, their football ecosystem, player characteristic, talent-wise. They have at least 3 or 4 world-class players, right? And they have a team that players that have been there before in the spotlight. They've won it. They were just better prepared than us. I also think that Arsenal tend to make stars versus buy stars. Ozil, Sanchez, Declan Rice, Aubameyang. Urian Timber, was he a star? He was a really good player, rated highly. I think he's one of our best signings in years. I think, he's just absolutely a sublime footballer. But we made Big Gabby a star. We made Saliba. They're prospects that we kind of made a star, and they've lived up to it in certain ways. When you look at Liverpool this transfer window, and even Manchester City, we're a little bit behind the curve, but that doesn't mean to say that we're not going to bring in that caliber of player. Zubimendi is not a superstar. He's a really good player. Is he world class? Maybe. I don't know.
There are people smarter than me that seem to think so. It's really tough with him, Sophie. We've scouted him, and I have to admit there are times I actually find him a bit clunky and unusual. But Real Sociedad have a really, really weird system this season. They've been very direct. He's playing a lot of first-time balls right up the pitch. They're just trying to get the ball up the pitch as quick as possible. So I think it's hard. When I watch him for Spain, I absolutely see a super elite player, but I don't know how to evaluate midfielders at international level because the international game tends to be a little slower. There's a little more space, a little more time on the ball, I think. Mm-hmm. Zubimendi is one of those players who I'm relying on the fact that a lot of very intelligent clubs like Liverpool, a lot of big clubs like Real Madrid really wanted him and liked him. And on the fact that he has been a central part of a Spain team that has been dominant. When you can come in and replace Rodri and hardly miss a beat, that's pretty compelling. I think the closest analog I see to him style-wise is Busquets. The danger with saying Busquets is Busquets is one of the best to ever do it. So people think you're saying, it's like saying Isak is like Henry. Yes, he's like Henry, but he's not as good as Henry. Nobody will be. I just think those kinds of players, Busquets type of players, can be hard to analyze because you have to watch a lot of 90s of them playing, a lot of full games to see the way they pull the strings, the way they control the tempo, the way they influence a game. And I know that sounds very hipster, right? But I really don't think he's a YouTube comp type player particularly.
Yeah. I mean, we had Graham Hunter on the show, and he's a huge fan of Zubimendi, not only as a player, but also as a man who's been covering him for years and years and years. He talked a lot about the relationship with Mikel Merino, and the two of them as well. Character-wise, they're totally Mikel Arteta players. And he raved about him. And you know, when he plays for Spain, obviously when you're around those types of players, the world class comes out in him, right? And you're right in that in the Euros, he was it the Euros or the World Cup that when he came in for Rodri, everyone was like, oh no, you know, the shit's going to hit the fan for Spain now, and he just played, you know, amazing football. All right, we're going to get you out on these. Hit the like button, everyone, if you're enjoying the conversation with Elliot. You know where to follow him if you've been living under a rock. So we start the season tomorrow. You're starting 11.
I'm not ready. Need a break. My starting 11, you mean if the deals go through that I hope go through, or as we are now?
Let's be positive. Like what you know, it's been a really good transfer window, and you're starting 11. You know, tomorrow.
You bet. So it's Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Miles, Zubimendi, Odegaard, Rice, Saka, Kai, Rodrygo. That's my starting 11. And I think that whether Kai starts every game at striker, depends a little on him, depends a little on who that guy is we bring in and how ready that guy is. But that's the 11 that I would feel really good about. And you might say, oh, that's too close to the one we just had. First of all, we rarely had that 11 this season at all. Well, we didn't have Rodrygo, but you get my point. We almost never had that 11. I would also point out that when we had that 11, but with Martinelli in it last season or the season before, and with Jorginho instead of Zubimendi, we hit 89 points and 91 goals in the league. So, you know, and that lineup also feels a lot better too, I think, if you realize that there is a Sesko or a Gyökeres behind Kai too, so that we're not just saying Kai's the striker, that's it, run it back. But yeah, that's probably an 11 that I'd be comfortable with.
Terence, I really don't understand. I just don't get what people don't get about Kai Havertz.
Can I give you a statistic?
We've talked about this before. Go on, Elliot.
So just because I think this is something to bear in mind about transfers, I want you to name every single player who has come into the Premier League from outside the Premier League in the last 5 seasons, okay? So every player who's come into the Premier League from outside of the Premier League in the last 5 seasons and produced 20 goals plus assists. All right, last 5 seasons, transferred into the Premier League, and in their first season, produced 20 goals plus assists. So 15-5 or 13-7, name them all. 5 seasons.
I'm waiting for Terence.
Yeah. I can give you the answer if you want to hear it.
Yeah, go on.
Erling Haaland. That's it. That's the only one. There has not been a single other player who's come in from outside the Premier League first season and hit 20 goals plus assists. And yet, in his first season at Arsenal, guess what Kai Havertz hit? 20 goals and assists. This is in the league. So whether you think Kai is great or Kai is good, but we need better, the likelihood that we're going to buy someone from outside the Premier League, that they're going to come into the Premier League and they're going to do what Kai has already done for us is very, very unlikely. I'm not saying Kai should be entitled to 38 games starting at striker, but I am saying that if he starts the first game at striker next season, he has already proven he can do for us what few transfers into the Premier League have ever done.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've supported him from day one, and I think that this season it was evident. I know Mikel Merino stepped in; he did a good job, but when you're a player like Kai, who's, you know, I just think performed. Some people think he's the jack of all trades and master of none. I just think we really missed him, you know, this past season, and the fact that he ended up still being our top goal scorer.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's embarrassing for the club, but it says a lot about him as well. So, yeah. Elliot, brilliant stuff from you. Is there any stone you have haven't left unturned? Is there anything else you want the squaddies to know Are you optimistic about next season? You don't know. We can't talk about that yet because the transfer window's still got another 2 months to go. What else do you want the squaddies to know about how you're feeling right now regarding our club?
Yeah, I think what I would say is, what's the expression? You know, strong opinions loosely held, or whatever the case is, right? Like, I think it's okay to have strong opinions on the last season, but I would just make sure they're loosely held in the sense that there is so much noise for last season. The refereeing decisions, the injuries, the transfers that didn't work, you know, how we played in the Premier League around major Champions League knockout round games, that I think any analysis you do of last season is inevitably going to wind up potentially looking wildly off base if we stay fit and ready to go this season. So I would just say, be open to the idea that we aren't as far away as last season made it feel. I think it is City, Liverpool, and Arsenal again this season, that one of those three will win the title. And I don't see any reason why any one of those teams is more clearly the right choice. I can make a bear case for Liverpool, and it's simple. Salah and Van Dijk start to experience their aging, and they fall away. I can make it simple with City. They're playing in the Club World Cup. They come into the season, maybe they pick up an injury, and oh, by the way, Rodri isn't himself again after the ACL. They're completely rebuilding their team. They need another year to figure it out. The case for Arsenal is simple. They just look a lot more like the healthy team that hit 89 points than the unhealthy team that hit mid-70s. And so if we can get some business done, and I think we will, then we should be right there, Sophie. And I think Zubimendi plus 2 forwards, I'm going to feel really good. You know, whatever else we do, I'm going to feel really good about our chances.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that you're a fan of Rodrygo and that you feel, to me, he doesn't elevate the team. He's a player that wins you titles. And you need the elevating the team. It's great to have Martinelli and Trossard on the bench. You know, Mikel Merino off the bench. Calafiori off the bench. You know, when you look at that type of bench and you've got the Rodrigos and the Zubimendis in the team, I mean, it just sounds different. It sounds exciting. It sounds like actually, you know, we can, you know, win the league. And so, yeah, I'm glad you're a fan of him. And I don't know if we're going to pull it off. I don't know, but we'll see.
It's hard. Anytime you're doing business with clubs like Real Madrid, it's hard. Yeah. The last thing I'll say is just, I think everybody at Arsenal is surely aware of how much pressure is on them to get this window right. If they don't, I think they will come under rightful scrutiny and criticism. I just think for right now, I feel pretty confident that they will get it right, but there's certainly no time to waste. I will feel a lot more critical if preseason kicks off and we haven't made the critical signings we need.
Yeah, that would be off. Right, you can find Elliot at Yankee Gunner, at Arsenal Vision Pod, of course. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. It is the fixture list eve, Elliot.
Really?
So,
is that like Festivus?
Yeah. I'm going George Costanza on it. I'm kind of I'm excited. You know, fixture list comes out. First thing I do is when are we playing Tottenham, and then you know we check out the rest. So enjoy your fixture list eve, squaddies, and you know go follow Elliot if you're not. And Elliot, thank you so much for joining. We look forward to having you back soon. Appreciate your time, squaddies at ease. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. And we are back on Thursday as well, 7 p.m. UK time. So cheers, everyone. Take care.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.